I hope all you lovely people had a nice stretch there. I let Professor Singer out of his closet to get a walkthrough, but now he's safely locked back in there. Yeah, he's locked in there. So let's now get back to Mill's discussion of justice. So far we've seen that Mill, so let's throw the slide back up there. So far we've seen Mill say that, yeah, justice is part of morality. It's the part that deals with rights and perfect duties, and we need to keep that separated from the justice, or not the justice, the rest of morality that deals with the imperfect duties. And now in this video, I want to talk about Mill's understanding of justice, because Mill is going to say there are three components of justice. Now, the first two of those components come from our emotions, our sentiments. I love that phrase, sentiments. Those old British people, they love this word sentiments when they talk about our emotions, because they're trying to give it kind of a rich context, because sentiments is a little bit broader perhaps than what we might normally think of emotion, but I'll just talk about emotion. Anyway, so three components of justice, two coming from our emotions, our sentiments, and one component of justice coming from our reason. And together, Mill thinks that we need all these three to have a true understanding now of justice. So let's start with that emotional component of justice. Now, as I mentioned in the first video of the module, John Stuart Mill believes that justice absolutely involves strong emotions and, powerful passions. People care about this. And I think we can start seeing why when we understand justice in terms of like your rights and perfect duties. And I think this will become even clearer after the discussion we just had in the previous video about what Mill thinks about rights, justice, perfect duties, these things. So why is it? Why is it that our emotions run so high when it comes to justice? Why are we so passionate? And I'll actually explain this by first showing why there's significantly less passion when it comes to our imperfect duties. So let's go back to that imperfect duty of charity. Where's Peter Singer? Oh my God, he's gone. He's gone. Oh my gosh, suppose he's in your room. He's behind you. Yeah, suppose. Wouldn't that be like a nightmare? Peter Singer, what's he doing here? Suppose Peter Singer comes into your room and he's a judgmental bastard. And so he looks at all your luxuries. I'm sure you got at least something nice in there. And if you don't, I'm really sorry. I'll send you a care package. Professor Gray will send a care package. No, Peter Singer looks around and sees all the luxuries you have. And he says, you can just imagine him. He's going to say, you're a pretty bad person for not donating. Hate to be the one to tell you. And then you might say, you turn to Peter Singer and say, I'm a bad person. Well, Mr. Professor Singer, who's the victim here? Who have I harmed with my bad behavior by not donating my luxuries? And suppose he reaches into his, I wish I should have one. That would be a great prop. Darn it. All I have is the only thing on my desk that I can reach is a coupon for Domino's. That's how sad my life is. What am I talking? It's half off. It's a good coupon. No, so Peter Singer says, I'll show you the victim of your lack of generosity. And he pulls out a picture of a child. And he says, this poor child, that's the victim. This poor child is in poverty. And now you might say, well, wait a minute, Professor Singer. What if I donated all my stuff here, all my luxuries, to other people in poverty? So not that child. Screw them. No, I donate to other children in poverty. Is that child in that picture, is she still my victim? And Singer will be like, well, you helped those other people, so I guess no, this child would not be the victim in that case. And then you could say, gotcha, into the closet, Professor Singer. Oh, and what? And you're like, what? Because there was no specific victim. By you keeping all your luxuries, there is no specific victim because you still retain the ability of who to help. Ha, Singer, you tried your little tricks. Look at this from a different perspective. There are millions of people, specific people with names that are in poverty. Now, so these are identifiable victims of poverty, but who is the specific villain or villains who has harmed them by not helping them? Who is the particular person responsible for that poverty? And it might be extremely difficult. I mean, take the course on global justice. Maybe then we can figure that out. But I think right now, here where you're sitting now, it might be really hard to figure out who's the specific person responsible for all these millions of people in poverty. I mean, maybe at the best you could do is wave your hands kind of vaguely and say, well, the system. But notice that's not very concrete. That's not a specific the system isn't a specific identifiable group of people. It's a system. And that's the idea with charity, beneficence. kindness, imperfect duties. There is no link. Now, pay attention. I'll say this slowly because this is kind of cool and important. There is no link when you're talking about charity between a specific identifiable villain doing specific identifiable harm to specific identifiable victims. Again, with imperfect duties, with stuff like charity, beneficence, kindness, with those kinds of duties, there is no link between specific identifiable villains doing specific identifiable harm to specific identifiable victims. Without that specificity, without that concreteness of specific people doing specific things to specific other people, it's hard to get passionate or have strong emotions about it. So if someone's violating their imperfect duties, because Singer and Mill would agree, you're probably spending too much on yourself and not enough on poverty. Because let's be clear, you are still a bad person for not being generous. Peter Singer may still have you there. Well, I'll let you decide that. But either way, if you're not giving to charity, you're still a bad person because you have violated your imperfect duty to be generous. But it's hard to get excited when there's no specific victim involved. Indeed, this might be why charity struggles, because it lacks that immediate concreteness of there being a villain doing a specific thing to harm a specific other person. Charity doesn't have that quite immediate concreteness. And that's true of all imperfect duties. They lack that specificity. So now we can contrast that to the passion we do see with rights, justice, and imperfect duties. Because when there is an injustice, when an injustice happens, when there is a violation of a person's rights, when someone violates a perfect duty, Mill agrees people get angry. There is passion when there's an injustice, a rights violation, a violation of a perfect duty. Why? Well, recall from the last video, a perfect duty is perfect for two reasons. Because we know two very precise things. There is a specific person who has the right, and there's a specific person with the duty to respect that right. That's all from the last video. And then that last video, I also gave the example about stealing. This was about someone stealing from you stealing from me. Stop doing that, by the way. Professor Gray, me, I'm a specific person who has a right to his property. And you are a specific person who has a duty or obligation to respect that. There's no ambiguity, very concrete. Who is who here? You and me. Now, suppose you violate my right, and you steal from me. Stop stealing. God, again. Peter, they're stealing from me. He doesn't care. He thinks we're all bastards for not donating. Not cool. Anyway, notice what we have here. We have an identifiable victim who has been wronged. That's me. And we have an identifiable villain who has done something wrong. That's you in this example. Don't steal from me, dude. Not cool. And so recall with the imperfect duties, we had none of that specificity. We see people who aren't doing their duty perhaps, and we see people who are in poverty, but we don't have a link between the two because no one has a right to your charity. But if you steal from me, that's a very specific you stealing from a very specific me. So again, with a violation of a perfect duty, which involves a rights violation, we now have specific identifiable villains doing specific identifiable harm to specific identifiable victims. There is no confusion. We have, again, a specific identifiable villain doing a specific identifiable harm to a specific identifiable victim. Concrete as it can get. There is no confusion about this when there is a rights violation. We know there are at least two people involved, and a very specific harm was done by one to the other. And that's, again, with the example of theft, you are the villain, the stealing is a specific harm, and being stolen from me, I'm the specified victim. And this is where the spicy passion for justice and rights come through. And Mill calls this the sentiment of justice, the sentiment of justice. He's just referring to the natural feelings on which justice is based. When justice is good, we feel good. When there's an injustice, we get angry and very passionate and, take to the streets type action. We care when it comes to rights violation, way more than we care about people who don't donate to the poor. And Mill would say, yeah, that's the difference between perfect and imperfect duties. Now, if we jump to page 224, we can see Mill talk about this sentiment. On page 224, where he says, "We have seen that the two essential ingredients in the sentiment of justice are the desire to punish a person who has done harm and the knowledge or belief that there is some definite individual to whom the harm has been done." So, in short, there are two components. These are our first two, components of justice. One, the desire to punish the villain who has done wrong. We have an emotional response, punish, arrgh. And we also have feelings of sympathy or empathy. Mill will call it sympathy. We have sympathy for the victim of that harm. So we got two powerful emotions, a powerful emotion to punish and a powerful emotion of feeling sympathy for the victim. And the desire to punish, Mill says, just comes from our basic concerns of self-defense and retaliation. Hey, I want to protect myself, and I want to punish the people who harm me or the people I care about, right? Those are strong, powerful feelings. So Mill says the desire to punish comes immediately from just you thinking about you. If so, you want to protect yourself and you want to punish the people who harm you. I think that's pretty simple. And that's the starting point for justice. But what makes justice cool is that desire to punish, that desire to protect, that desire to retaliate can be combined with number two, the feelings of sympathy we have for victims. Because yes, that starts kind of selfishly when you're a child. Your sympathy is mainly for yourself, maybe your mom, if you love your mom and dad. And brothers, I hope, and sister too. Don't forget sister. But again, we usually start feeling sorry for ourselves when we're the victim. That's sympathy for ourselves. But because we have sympathy, and Mill is very clear on this point, that sympathy is one of the higher faculties that animals may not have as good as we got. Again, remember, Mill is all about the higher faculties. As progressive beings, he thinks, sympathy is a very high order faculty of a progressive being, and that once we develop our capacity for sympathy, it allows us to care about more and more other people. The more, where we can even start to feel sympathy for strangers. So yes, we start with sympathy for ourselves, develop our higher capacity for sympathy. We start caring about our family. Then we start caring about our friends. And then we can start caring about our communities and strangers and maybe even people around the globe. Look, that sympathy may not be as strong as we get further and further away, but it still can be there. And so Mill thinks these two sentiments, again, the desire to punish the villain and our feeling of sympathy with the victim, Mill says these two come together into that desire he mentioned there, the desire to punish all villains. Not just the villains who have harmed you, not just the villains who've harmed your friends and family. No, any villains anywhere. We get this sympathy, this desire to punish all the wrong people. Anyone who does harm at all. So we want to harm those people. If you're a villain, we want to harm you. So go back to page 224. On that page, you can see this desire to punish all villains. Because on page 224, Mill says, by virtue of superior intelligence, even apart from a superior range of sympathy, a human being is capable of apprehending a community of interest between himself and the human society for which he forms a part, such that any conduct which threatens the security of society generally is threatening to his own and calls forth his instinct, if instinct it be, of self-defense. So again, sympathy, this higher faculty for all progressive beings. Again, like what we saw back with Mill, essential, these higher faculties for Mill's conception of, eudaimonism and happiness. That capacity for sympathy creates a desire that we care about all suffering and a desire to punish those who do it. And indeed, okay, Singer, I'll give you your piece, Professor Singer, because then Professor Singer would then say, and that's why maybe we can also feel sympathy for animals. Mill might, I don't know if Mill would agree, but Singer would certainly say that, you can expand your capacity not only to feel sympathy for all humans, but for any and all who suffer. Something interesting to think about. If you have pets, I think this is nothing unusual here. I'm sure you have plenty of sympathy. If you have a dog or a cat or another pet or horses, lots of cool animals horses are amazing. But you can have sympathy for their suffering as well. Now, what is important, the sentiment of justice, this desire to punish all villains. Yes, those are the first two. The first two sentiments of justice, desire to come together to form the desire to punish everyone who does harm. That's not enough, Mill says. Yes, that explains our passion. That explains why we care. But true justice requires more, according to Mill. So here we can jump to page 224, where Mill talks about this, about the limits of feelings. So it's gone to page 224, scroll all the way down, and we can see where Mill says the sentiment in itself has nothing moral in it. What is moral is the exclusive subordination of it to the social sympathies so as to wait on and obey their call. For the natural feeling tends to make us resent indiscriminately whatever anyone does that is disagreeable to us. But when moralized by the social feelings, it only acts in the directions conformable to the general good. Just persons resenting a hurt to society, though not otherwise a hurt to themselves, and not resenting a hurt to themselves, however painful, unless it be the kind which society has a common interest with them in the repression of. So what Mill is saying here is that our emotions alone aren't enough to discriminate between the good sympathies that we should act on and the bad sympathies, the ones we shouldn't act on. Because look, slave owners in the American antebellum South, those slave owners, they had plenty of sympathy. But who did they feel sympathy for? Not for their slaves, that's for sure. No, their sympathies were for other slave owners. So if you were a white slave owner, you would hear your fellow slave owners complaining about slaves escaping. And who do you feel sympathy for? Not for the escaped slaves. You feel, oh, I'm so sorry. Those slaves escaped. Let's go round them up. I mean, whoa. Not cool, dudes. But that's the thing. We can have profound sympathies, but they can be warped and perverted for all sorts of reasons. And again, with the same kind of vigilantes have an emotional response to punish evildoers. But of course, vigilantes often punish the wrong people or punish too harshly. So we need a corrective, something to guide what he calls our social sympathies. We need something that corrects these emotions, that prevents them from going astray, but keeps them focused on doing the good. We need to ensure that our sympathies and our desire to punish is used the right way and not selfish or biased like it is for the slave owners. And so the corrective, Mill says, is a rule of conduct that will come from our natural, intellectual, rational capacities. And this rule of conduct will help. It'll tell us what counts as a harm, what does not count as a harm. And like I said, of course, John Stuart Mill is a utilitarian. And so you can pretty much guess, as I said earlier in the first video, I'm pretty sure we can guess what principle he thinks should guide our conduct. Yeah, of course. It's the principle of utility, of course. And so Mill concludes that justice combines these two emotional responses that come together, this desire to punish. But these emotions can go crazy, go wrong. So we need a rational rule of conduct, the principle of utility, which will tell us when and how to act justly. So those are the three components of justice, two from the emotion, one from reason. And so now we can see that Mill is trying to smuggle in his principle of utility into justice, but he still has to show us that, okay, if the principle of utility, if utilitarianism is that rule of conduct for justice, well, Mill, you got to show us, buddy, that your view of justice isn't going to allow the suppression of rights, right? All those examples from the last module that showed how utilitarianism allows rights violations and other bad stuff to happen. So yeah, we need Mill's argument for how justice will still be justice when it's based on utility. And so Mill's going to have to give us that final argument resolving the tensions between utilitarianism and justice. And so before we go into that, you want a break? You want a snack, Peter? Okay, Professor Singer, he gets a snack too. We'll all take a snack break. I could use one. You can use one. Professor Singer can use one in the closet. You get a snack. I get a snack. He gets a snack. And then we'll meet back here to wrap up this module on justice and the greater good.
Shut it!